M. The Media Project. Driven by data. Driven by technology. Driven by community development. Driven by the need to get results for your project. SM Graves Associates. Delivering real estate development to you, including project management and pre-development services with a keen focus on delivering community-oriented projects. We build profitable projects that respond to the needs of your neighborhood. Join the SMG family. Find us at smgravesassociates.com.
Hey, listeners, welcome to another Innovato2 or Are We Here Yet podcast.
It's all part of the Media Project. It's all good.
That's right. So thank you again for continuing plugging in, tuning into our conversations here. This is Ryan Munn, your co-host, along with Scott Graves, representing the east and west side of Vermont today. And we've got an incredible guest. But first of all, how are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing wonderful. It's been a very exciting last couple of days on the investment front with several of my projects. And, though we're living in some strange times, I still remain very optimistic for entrepreneurs and for community development.
Excellent. It's good to keep that optimism going. And today, normally I'm in the home office with a little better setup, but, got to be thankful to technology to be able to catch it on the go. And really excited to share our guests with folks today. Our guest has a very deep background in AI, but not just AI. I would call Peter the father of artificial general intelligence, and so thankful to have your time and to be able to share some of your story and, frankly, your very important insights today. Peter, how are you doing today?
Great. Yeah, terrific. Thanks for having me. And, well, if I'm the father of AGI has many fathers, but yeah.
Well, I believe you either coined the term or were one of the first ones to start using that term prolifically. And, the key nuance on that term, I think, is really important, especially in today's conversation. So share with us, just to start off, if you would, just a little bit of your story for those who might not know some of the deep background and how far back your work goes in AI.
Yes, certainly. I actually started as an electronics engineer, started my own electronics company doing industrial electronics. And then I fell in love with software. And my company turned into a software company, ERP software for small to medium-sized businesses. That ended up being quite successful, went from the garage to 400 people, did an IPO. Very exciting, lots of ups and downs, but yeah, that was great. So it's when I exited this company that I really had the freedom to pursue something that I think is a really, really big deal, and that is to build thinking machines. And by machines, it could just be software, PC, or it could be a robot, but to basically build machines that can think, learn, and reason the way humans do. And actually, that was the original dream of AI. When the term AI was first coined 70 years ago now. That's what they were after, to really mimic human ability to think and invent and reason. Now, 70 years ago, they actually thought they could crack this in a few years. So it turned out to be a lot harder. So what happened over the intervening decades is that the field of AI really turned into the field of narrow AI, where you take one particular problem or one set of problems that we consider requiring human intelligence to solve. Chess playing would be a very good example. But then you use external intelligence, you use the intelligence, the human intelligence of the programmer or the data scientist to use computers to solve that problem. So it's not really that the software is smart enough to figure it out by itself. And that's really been the story now of AI, and is even still to this day. Even things like AlphaGo and AlphaFold and so on, they really narrow AI, and they rely very heavily on the intelligence of the programmer and the data scientist to figure out what architecture to use, what training, how to tweak the parameters, prompt engineering, and, all sorts of things to actually end up with a result. So what I wanted to figure out is how we can build thinking machines. And I actually took off 5 years to study all different aspects of intelligence, to deeply understand intelligence. Started with epistemology, theory of knowledge. How do we know anything? What is reality? How can we be certain of things? And what is free will? What is consciousness? Those kinds of questions to kind of get a better handle on it. Because if we want to build human-like cognition, then it's kind of important to understand that. I also studied cognitive psychology, how children learn, what IQ tests measure, and how our intelligence differs from animals, because there seems to be a really big gap between even the smartest animals and what humans can do. And then, of course, I studied what had already been done in the field of AI. So the culmination of that, I came up with a design for sort of what we would now call cognitive AI, that a system that can learn and think and reason similar to humans. And I got together with a few other people in 2001 that had similar ideas to get back to the original dream of AI. And we decided to write a book, and we want to come up with a book title and sort of highlight that we are back to the original dream of AI. And so 3 of us came up with the name. We're brainstorming it, and we settled on artificial general intelligence. Ben Goertzel, Shane Legg, and myself came up with the term AGI. And I've basically been working on that ever since, alternating between core development, and then when we ran out of money, we pivot to commercialize it, sold the commercial company, back to development, ran out of money, pivoted again to commercializing it. And we are now actually back to the development with our company, was 100% focused on, we believe we are now very close to adult level general intelligence. So that's what we're focusing on. So for a while.
That sort of narrowing of the field for a period of time, was that, how did that come to be? Was that because as money got involved in the technology, investors sort of narrowed the field of interest, or not on your personal part, but on the industry as a whole?
Yeah, excellent question. In fact, I call it the narrow AI trap. And I've seen that with pretty much anybody working on AGI or, trying to get general AI going, is as soon as you want to have a killer demo, or you want to start making money, or even or even publish a paper, if you're sort of academically involved, you basically then very quickly end up using external intelligence to write some special code or to do things so that you can get more impressive results commercially. And in fact, that's what happened with us. I mean, we fell into the narrow AI trap with our eyes open. We knew exactly as soon as we commercialized, we would end up hard coding a lot of things and injecting external intelligence into the system to be able to do the commercial job. But it even happens just to come up with an impressive demo. You can make it more impressive by just hard coding a bunch of stuff, or helping the system along, beating any benchmarks, if you want to do that. So it's really difficult to have that staying power to carry on what you need to do to build a system that can learn by itself, that can figure things out by itself. And of course, in the early development cycle, it's not going to be very impressive. It's like having a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, well, not going to have much commercial value or beat any benchmarks, So it's a very interesting question. Now, of course, over the decades from, the last 70 or 60 years or so, I think people just didn't even attempt to build, or mostly they didn't attempt to build AGI. It was sort of the field of AI. Really, everybody assumed that you were just going to kind of solve one problem, like expert systems. They require humans to basically build a flow chart and do things. I don't think people really even realized that the field had changed from its original ideal. I work in AI. Well, of course, I designed something that does clever things.
Yeah, but it sounds like really early on, they were talking about AI, artificial intelligence, but really it was just automation, right? They're just automating some intelligent processes. But to your point of doing the research and really understanding what intelligence is, it's almost like there's this iterative process going on between us and machines, helping us learn what intelligence really is in order for us to have the capacity to even build it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So yes, one of them is process automation. A lot of AI, and now with sort of the agentic systems that people are building, is very much process automation. But just any flowcharty type system is basically process automation. That's one area. The other area that AI has been quite successful on is kind of optimization. Where you have massive amounts of data and you're trying to extract certain patterns. And it has been, that is under the heading of AI, but it's definitely not AGI, not general intelligence. And that would include sort of image categorization and speech recognition, translation, and those kinds of things, where you're really training the system with massive amounts of data and you try to extract certain patterns from that. But the other point that you touched on here, this is actually really quite surprising to me, is I can say with confidence that Demis Hassabis, he on a recent podcast, the CEO of DeepMind, said that we don't understand intelligence. We need to build AGI in order to understand intelligence. I also have the personal experience in talking to Elon Musk, and he said, we have no idea what intelligence is. Intelligence is what intelligence does, which is sort of fortune cookie philosophy in my mind. So to me, it seems really kind of absurd that, we have these billions and now $1 trillion of money putting into systems where people freely admit they don't know what they're building. They don't know what they're trying to do. So to me, the starting point from first principles should be you start by understanding what is so special about human intelligence. What is human intelligence? What's special about it in order to build it? But it's very much an outlier. The consensus generally out there is we don't know what intelligence is. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of compute. That's the hammer we've got. Let's see what nails we can find. And obviously they've been spectacularly successful, especially with recent large language models.
But that's an interesting. It's so interesting that it escapes most of us on a day-to-day, which is we have this vague notion. We understand that there are electrochemical processes going on, and that's primarily how our brain is interacting with the rest of the systems in our body. But that doesn't mean that we understand fundamentally what intelligence is. We can just sort of denote the end results, right? Is that partially what you're trying to say?
Right. Well, there's a difference between knowing how our brain creates intelligence And yes, we don't have a very good understanding on how we get from neurons firing to intelligence. So the focus that we have is not reverse engineering the brain, but rather understanding the mind, mental processes. And, if you start from epistemology, theory of knowledge, how we know things, and the importance, for example, of concept formation and generalization and being able to use context. And, when you look at why can animals not learn language, for example, complex, they can't learn syntax. So why does animal intelligence kind of top out? How do children learn? What are the processes and what's happening from a mental process point of view, not the brain. And there's actually a lot we understand. And one of the most important things is not having a general definition of intelligence, because, that gets out of hand very quickly, because then you say, well, aren't ants intelligent? They, or bees, well, the beehive and so on. That, yes, and you can kind of get stuck. In fact, Marvin Minsky, the AI pioneer, said that one of the words is like a suitcase word. It has lots of different meanings. So you throw all those meanings into a suitcase, close the lid, and then put a label on it. You need to unpack the thing in order to actually make sense of it. So when I say we understand intelligence, we understand what makes human intelligence special and what is required to do that. And, there are very specific things. One of them that is totally overlooked by the mainstream AI community is the absolute crucial importance to be able to learn incrementally, to adapt. I mean, that is a key requirement of human intelligence. As we're having this discussion, we are updating our model.
Correct.
You hear you hear a sentence. First of all, do I understand what this means? Do I need to ask a question? Does it agree with what I already know? Does it contradict what I know, and why so? So we ingest and integrate knowledge as we come across it. And you absolutely have to do that. You can't just put them in a big pile like large language models. 30 trillion pieces of information and then just number crunch them willy-nilly until the model settles down. Now, again, having said that, they're quite spectacular. I don't know anybody who would have 5 years ago would have believed that you can get the kind of performance that you're getting out of large language models by pure brute force, by the sheer number. I mean, we can't even begin to get our heads around what 30 trillion tokens means, a child learns with a few million words, literally a million times, more than a million times less data. But it's fundamentally the wrong approach. If you have an AI that cannot learn in real time incrementally, you're on the wrong track. And there are other key things, that, for example, you really cannot get away from hallucinations because they don't have metacognition. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know where their knowledge came from or how it was integrated. And that's one of the reasons that they're really, as I say, don't know what they don't know and can be so confident about completely made up stuff.
So, go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, touch on that a little bit too. You mentioned the trillions of tokens that go into these models. That correlates pretty directly to the amount of processing and power needed to do this as well. And again, in comparison to the human mind, right? Like, you may not understand the physiology, but we know roughly how much energy goes into our mind and the fairly vast intellectual capability that just one human has, let alone collective humans. Talk about that a little bit in when you mention that, that's like another red flag that like, okay, it's pretty cool. We're doing some awesome things, but we're on a little bit of the wrong track in some way. I'll keep using it, but.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, sort of going back to first principles, when you consider our brain uses 20 watts, not 20 gigawatts, we don't need a nuclear power station to power our brains. So they actually, the two things correlate. The ability to learn incrementally, the amount of power you need to take one sentence and kind of integrate it there is very low. And if you can acquire all your knowledge that way, again, many, many orders of magnitude less power requirement. Computer technology isn't as efficient as neurons' brains yet, but it's also not necessarily that far off. So there's kind of the absurdity. And in fact, it's sort of so absurd that, you need 30 trillion pieces of information. You need $1 billion worth of number crunching and equipment. I think the latest, I just read something today that once you take the equipment and the training and data gathering into account, it costs $1 billion now to train a model. One of the frontier models, $1 billion. But even when you're using the system, there's something that's actually quite absurd. Consider that a modern large language model has system prompts that are built in. And that would be several thousand tokens, maybe even tens of thousands, I don't know, but definitely many thousands of tokens of system prompt. Now imagine you had a personal assistant that you've now used for a year that, helps you and gets to know you and so on. You would probably have your personal prompts of a few thousand words on how you want the system to actually interact with you, your preferences and whether you want to keep things short and, who to talk to or not. And then you have, say, a year's worth of conversations that you've had with your large language model. So that would be many hundreds of thousands of tokens. Now consider that every single token that's emitted, that's output by the system, has to process all of those hundreds of thousands of tokens. I mean, how absurd is that? Imagine before we utter one word, we have to kind of reprocess everything we've ever heard. That's worse than a sloth at the DMV.
Yeah, and think of the sheer speed at which the human brain can do this. In a past life, I was a jazz musician, an improviser of music, regardless of style. To improvise music is to recall patterns. It's really not magic, and it's not as much risk as possible, right? Or chance, rather,
right.
as people think. It is your brain recalling patterns and reconstituting those patterns and creating yet new variations of those patterns. And you're doing this seemingly instantaneously.
Yes.
And so, which I bring that up because I hear in a lot of what you're saying, we spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about what is the true definition or definitions of when we get to a point where fully leveraging AI to create, what we might call the bionic worker. In other words, rather than eliminating jobs with AI technology, how do we wholeheartedly enhance the human experience at work? And, the first thing that readily comes to mind half the time is, now we're taking away a lot of the mundane tasks of work so that we can put all of our human effort into more strategy and so forth. But what I'm hearing from you is, what's the more worthwhile work on artificial intelligence technology is to get to a point where, and if we use the jazz musician analogy, you learn more of that dialogue by interacting with others that are also doing what you're doing. And that creates yet more variation. So imagine you're strategizing as a worker, and you can truly be bouncing off ideas, or you can have a set of inputs you're offering the artificial intelligence. And the artificial intelligence, because it can aggregate from so much more experience so readily, that it's giving you a lot more variation than if you were even just doing this between yourself and 3 other humans. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Now, this is touching on something that people tend to get uncomfortable with, is the whole idea of what will AGI do, and I think a lot of people kind of say that AI is not there to replace people, but to augment their work, because it's sort of politically correct to say that, and especially large corporations, then they tend to say that.
But of course, they're not using it in that way so far.
Correct. But AGI, any cognitive desk-bound job, an AGI will be able to do better and cheaper than a human. That's, but I think you really have to turn the perspective on its head of where people focus on unemployment and focus on, doesn't everybody want to win the lottery? When you talk to people and do what kind of they want to do rather than what they have to do to earn a living. And it will be a very different world. But I don't think one can, on the one hand, say you have the super powerful human level AI plus the advantages of being an AI. It'll be able to concentrate 24/7. It'll have instantaneous access to all the information in the world by just essentially thinking about it. One piece at a time, not everything at once. It has photographic memory. It will be much better at logical thinking. Won't fall into some of the logical fallacies that we have, as easily. So you're going to have these AI workers that are really going to be less expensive and more capable than, pretty much any human on cognitive tasks. Now, they will not have their own agenda or dreams or wishes or whatever. So it will free us up to say, what do we want to do with that power? I think people will have to work much less in order to meet their needs, because goods and services will be dramatically cheaper with this technology. But the part that I find sort of really exciting, I think, touches on how it can enhance individuals, how AI can help individuals. And we call this a personal assistant. And the reason I double up on the word personal here is I believe that the technology should be available so that you own the AI. It serves your agenda, not some mega corporation. That you aren't the product, but the AI is yours. You control it.
Well, that's very interesting. How do we go? Because the top-down approach, right, to financing, investing in, and implementing game-changing technology like this, it's pretty much a top-down approach. How do we go from 200 plus years of industrial revolution history on how we realize things to that world? That world that you're suggesting, highly enticing to guys like us. But I'm interested to know, what would be the day-to-day from now till then that really would truly get us there?
Yeah. Well, let's make it happen. So our approach, and something we haven't sort of spelled out specifically, but let me just touch on that quickly, is there's now a pretty much general consensus that large language models will not get us to AGI. There was a recent survey of AI scientists, researchers, 76% of them agreed with that. Demis Hassabis is saying quite clearly that, large language models are not going to get us. Jan LeCun puts it very strongly. He says large language models are an off-ramp to AGI, a distraction, a dead end. And he's telling his students, don't even bother learning Gen AI. It's not the future.
With fast-moving and sweeping changes to our economy in the works, we all need to reconsider how our investments are best placed. At Partners in Housing, we believe your money is best placed locally, utilized to increase value and provide stable and desirable housing to your neighbors. Contact Partners in Housing to find out how you can participate in local housing opportunities by joining the Partners in Housing Fund. Look us up at partnersinhousingvt.com or email us at partnersinhousingvt@gmail.com.
So if the big companies, if their expertise and their momentum is in large language models, and what you really need to get to AGI is cognitive AI, that's much closer to the 20 watts and a few million words rather than 30 trillion to learn it. It's a fundamentally different technology. You do need to start with understanding intelligence in order to build such a system. And there are very, very few people in the world who actually even are pursuing this or have the background or motivation to do that. So I believe AGI will come. One is not likely to come out of the big companies, and of course we've seen that before. When there's a new technology, how could little Amazon ever hope to compete against Walmart? Or little Google compete against existing search engines? So I believe it will come from another source, but also because with cognitive AI, you require so much less computing power that it can actually run on your local machine, on your local device. And that democratizes significantly. Add to that open source approaches where you could basically say, this can be made available, to everyone in the world as their personal assistant. Now, of course, you can still make trillions of money by replacing workers where, you have to have the structure and the integration, and there can be licensing fees. Even for the personal system can be a freemium model. So it's certainly not that there isn't money to be made with AGI, even if you make a personal assistant available to everyone. But it will take that decision of whoever develops AGI to make that happen and not go down the road that everybody else. I mean, we now, ChatGPT, Perplexity, they're all talking about you becoming the product. You've always been the product. By interacting with it, they get the data for training. Now that they're kind of running out of useful data, they're focusing on, we're going to inject ads into it. I mean, they all have it. They've all announced that they're basically adding ads to their large language model because obviously they're losing money on. They have to do something. So, what I'm hoping is, if we can get to AGI first, that the partners that we have, the financial partners or general business partners that we have, will totally share our philosophy. In fact, we will not engage with partners who do not share our philosophy, where I want to make this technology available to everyone in the world as, a personal assistant that you own, serves your agenda, and not some mega corporation. And that becomes the second personal. Of course, it's hyper-personalized to you, as much as you want to share with it, your history, your goals, your dreams, and so on. So in a way, it's more like an exocortex. It's more an extension of your brain. And I think this is where I see how it's really like the Enlightenment on steroids, that everybody can think more clearly, become enlightened basically by having this personal assistant that you can bounce ideas off, that can help the kind of things you were mentioning. And in a way, from a moral perspective, it'll also be like an angel on your shoulder because, a lot of silly things that we humans do are that we act emotionally, we act with too little knowledge, or we don't think things through properly.
Or we refuse to take in knowledge that we inherently understand is knowledge, but it doesn't speak to what we want to believe, right?
Exactly.
You're describing almost the ultimate sort of Edmund Burke, the landscape to create on which the vast majority of your population can seek opportunity, and everyone gets an opportunity to do that, right?
Correct. Absolutely. And then you have this little angel on your shoulder that when you are likely to, break off a relationship or make a crazy investment, emotionally, they'll say, well, maybe hang on, just sleep on it, think about it. And, or as you say, if you have confirmation bias, you read something and you say, I agree with that, but maybe your AGI will give you both sides of the, give you will do more research for you and say, well, actually, if you dig a little bit deeper, here are the facts. And then it can also help you think things through of what is a likely outcome if you make this decision or that decision, kind of thinking through the consequences. So, yeah, I absolutely believe this will tremendously boost human flourishing for people to have this personal assistant.
And with that said, you've given already some excellent examples, but I want to ask the question more pointedly: how ill prepared is society for fully leveraging even just the current form that AI has taken? Right? We've got people sharing content, not sure whether it was generated by AI or not, or assisted by AI. We have people, and before take AI out of the equation for a moment, we have people whose relationship to technology in various ways isn't exactly healthy, right? They've either given up too much agency to technology, and it's never technology isn't the problem. The problem is us and our systems for education and for, so we're the problem, right? And often we blame the tools, or we don't blame the users of the tools, right? What are your thoughts on how we need to prepare ourselves to be able, again, to fully leverage in a positive way the technology to come?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing from the way I see it is to make sure whoever develops AGI, that it will be introduced sort of in the way that I explained. Now, yes, humanity generally isn't ready for such radical change, but it's going to happen. I mean, I don't, I think ChatGPT or large language models already give us a taste for, in a way, it seems so close, and in another way it seems so far, with hallucinations, the lack of learning. But what they can do is really quite phenomenal. So I don't think the limitation is hardware, because, what you can see is already quite phenomenal. So it's going to happen, whether we get there first with creating AGI, or other people, or if they just stumble on it by accident, large companies trying lots of different things. I cannot see that AGI is more than 10 years away. In fact, I struggle to see that it's more than 5 years away, because I think the hardware capacity is there. It's just coming up with the right algorithms, basically, the real-time learning algorithms, basically, that you need. Now, it's a non-trivial engineering problem, and I think you absolutely need that background of cognitive psychology, epistemology, and so on, to be able to crack it. So I think it's going to happen, and then a lot of the problems with current AI is really that it's not smart enough, and that is not personal. Those are kind of two big problems. So if you have something that's smarter and that's personal and is looking after you rather than trying to exploit you, then the story changes. Then if you're not sure whether something is fake on the internet, well, your AI can figure it out. It can double check it. It'll have infinite patience, to dig deeper and say, well, this video, let me see you. Let me dig into it and see whether the video is fake or real. I can cross-check, thousands of different sources if need be. So you'll have that assistant to protect you from, and you'll have a lot of defenses basically for the kind of exploitation and lack of intelligence that the current systems have. So, but yes, there will be there'll be part of the population that embraces this, and there'll be part of the population that fights tooth and nail. It'll be interesting to see this dynamic on how long, for example, lawyers and doctors hold out, in terms of trying to protect their profession and things like that. But ultimately, somewhere in the world, whoever embraces the technology and uses it will have such an advantage, such an economic advantage in being able to do it faster, better, cheaper. So it's going to happen. But there's also another perspective in terms of this sort of singularity happening. This rapid introduction of AGI. One can almost make an argument. Or not almost, but one can maybe make the argument, or should make the argument, that maybe we need AGI to help save us from ourselves. I mean, when you look around the world, especially more recently with what's happening, the kind of idiotic governments that are in place in, so much of the world.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be getting better. One can make the argument.
I would make the argument that it's being further enhanced or accelerated by the current generative AI, in that it really just is highly reflective of our own state of confirmation bias, right? The generative models are often easily subject to confirmation bias based on the information they're fed. And so I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on the concept. It's nice to wax on about the little angel on our shoulder. In my mind, right, the thing that makes that possible is the accountability of the technology. And what I see today is that we have a lot of these technologies that are just a black box, right? We don't, even the leaders in their companies and the engineers building them don't fully comprehend what's going on, nor have the ability to forensically go back and really articulate what is happening, how and why. And so I would imagine that what you're describing, given that it's lower power, given that it's less overall actual inputs, outputs transacting within the mechanism, that it's less of a black box, that there's more of an ability to fine tune what you're building and offer something that has an openness and accountability for us to build trust with. And I think that's the piece that even those of us who truly embrace technology, there's a trust building that doesn't happen instantaneously or momentarily. It's something that's built and continually reinforced over time through that accountability and proof in the process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a couple of things here. One of them, our approach of cognitive AI it's actually based on a vector graph database, which is inherently scrutable. So you can see what's going on. Now, of course, some decision making may be very, very complex. You may need very sophisticated tools in order to trace back exactly what are all the inputs and how do they interact. But inherently, it is not a black box. The second advantage is with our approach, you can actually tag every input because it learns incrementally. You can tag every input and say where you got the information from. So you can also say how reliable is the source of this particular piece of information, which you can't do with large language models. It's this big heap of 30 trillion tokens, good, bad, and ugly, that you got from the internet. You don't know what's good, what's bad, or what's ugly. And there's no way of untangling that, or tagging that. So you have the scrutability, you can look inside what it's doing. You have the ability to also, because you're training with so much less data, you can focus on the data quality rather than the quantity. Right now, everybody's focusing on how can we get more? How can we get more? It's just all a game about quantity. But with cognitive AI, you can concentrate on the quality of the data, and where it's come from, and it's scrutable. You can analyze it and audit it. The other thing that we've already spoken about is when you have a personal assistant that you own, you will learn to trust that. And it's not going to be, hey, it's a current model, it's running today. Yesterday they tweaked the parameters to make it, whatever. If it's grok, maybe to make it funnier or more aggressive, or if it's something else, is to sugarcoat everything. You have your own personal assistant that isn't just going to change under your feet. And the very good, very important point you made there is trust is something that is earned over time. So if you have the same personal assistant that you're relying on, over time you will learn to trust it more and more because it gives you good advice and so on, which with the cloud service in the current model, you simply don't have that.
It really feels like it has the capacity, because I feel like fundamentally this is what needs to change. You mentioned, because it's not just the United States. There is this trend towards authoritarianism throughout the world. we are now 2 centuries into the Industrial Revolution. And regardless of the change in technology, the underlying financial models and how we accrue money in that industrial revolution is pretty much the same. And so that needs to change, right? Like the accrual of wealth, the concept for that needs to change. And if that changes, you get away from, I feel like what's happening right now is the reaction to a potential new age with systems that do create this sort of level playing field, and that there's a reaction to that, right? Knowing that is in fact game changing. There's a reaction amongst those that wish to keep things the same, more or less, for as long as possible, knowing that the change is going to happen, but as long as they're alive, or as long as they're, they want to keep an old model going as long as they can.
Yeah.
Even for technologists, you look at the largest technology companies, but the underlying financial ideas there are very much the same as prior iterations of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally very much believe in private property and free trade.
Yeah.
The problem is that current systems across the world are so distorted that you have cronyism. You don't have capitalism, you have cronyism.
Yeah.
Because governments have so much power, they can give out so many favors. And basically the way you get things done is by, buying a senator or two or what.
I mean, anything but a free market, right? This is what I'm saying isn't my treatise on,
Right.
I'm not anti-capitalistic, but if we're going to have a free market, let's have a free market.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And, that now the exact dynamics, of course, is just so hard to predict. The main thing I can say is we'll have AGI to help us manage this, to think it through. What is a UBI kind of system, tax on AI systems that'll, fund kind of basic services. I'm not thrilled about that idea. Is it that everybody just, has kind of a fund that they can live off, and then individuals can still choose to spend less and accumulate more. So there's still this difference on people who want to do more work, and of course, enterprise will still be needed, and there's still different values of people who create value. We haven't spoken about artistic creation and, things like that. I see most people, or not most people, but I think a lot of people in this era of abundance, what they will want to do is to help the rest of the world also climb up this ladder. I lived in Africa for quite a long time, and Africa, but really many parts of the world. I mean, there is just so much to be done to upgrade the infrastructure, the systems, and help people. I would see a lot of people would be motivated to see that their fellow human beings can also enjoy life the way we are and will be.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I see from some of the conversations we've had, and we first met at a digital currency blockchain event. I see these kinds of tools enabling this idea of a digital representative, a personal assistant that would really represent us in many ways, right? From financial, healthcare, personal interactions to our own creative expression. And it brings up something that I kind of have a question and concern about myself, in that, just as we kind of almost nobody knows a phone number anymore because we have a device that does that for us, right? And so there's this a little bit of a fear that if we have these tools, it'll do it all for us. Will our brain not shut down and stop doing those things? But on the sort of more optimistic side, is it not that really it frees up our mind to do those more human things with that energy and with that power of our mind, and frees up the agent to go out and actually advocate for us? Because is that not really the challenge with our current systems, is that, like you said, it's it's obscure. There's a few people that kind of know how to work the system or are able to be okay to work to get the system to work for them. But most individuals don't really have the agency to stand on a level playing field to get the value of what they create, of what they put out in the world. And so for everyone to have a similar but uniquely personalized representative to interact in that universal playing field and sort of advocate for our compensation, that really creates a free market in the truest sense of the word. And so I guess what I want to get from you in this is, in all of your research on intelligence and the science of intelligence going into building this, is there proof? Do we have some evidence that our brains aren't going to just shut down and stop being so intelligent because we have this massively intelligent piece of technology? Or is there evidence that there's really going to be a compounding, like as we reach the singularity, is it really something we'll never reach because we'll all grow together?
It's very hard to predict how it will play out. And I'm sure, again, I go back to the analogy of everybody winning the lottery. Now, right now, a lot of people winning the lottery, it ends in tears. They basically don't really make good use of the money. But then there are kind of two things that are very different, or several things that are very different. First of all, right now, very, very few people win the lottery. And when they do, everybody swarms to them. And that's often a huge problem, that they then either give all their money away or they get conned or they have to withdraw from their families and things. And either way, it's sort of very disruptive. Whereas if everybody wins the lottery, you don't have that kind of dynamic, and people will learn how to cope with this new freedom. So I think that's one thing where the dynamic is very different. And the other thing is, you do have your personal assistant that is also a psychologist and a helper and a philosopher that can help you and hopefully keep you away from just being addicted to gaming all day or whatever, and will help guide you. I mean, it's literally like you have your own psychologist on board. Now, will a certain percent of the population just totally ignore their angel on their shoulder? I don't know. How hard should we try? What you get back into the same difficult problems we have right now. How hard do you try to get a drug addict sober if they don't want to be sober? It's just we'll have better tools and more wealth to deal with it. Right now, we actually clearly are not doing a very good job of helping people that are addicted. So, yeah, it's hard to predict how many people will use that opportunity to fully flourish, to fully blossom and reach their full potential. But I think a lot of people will. I mean, a lot of people who become rich through work or whatever, take off time and study and travel and, do things, spend more time with their families, whatever it might be. When I sold my listed, when I got out of a listed company, I took a few years off and, did scuba diving and traveling and a lot of reading and stuff. And that was wonderful, and then I got to a point where, I want to do something productive again. And as I say, there'll be an unlimited amount of productive work that the world will need for everybody to kind of come up, to speed.
Peter, as we wrap up here, I just want to say thank you so much for your insight and the thought that you've put into what at least in our neck of the woods, we perceive as a very important next step to, frankly, to what comes next and how to better help our neighbors leverage not just technology, but really consider, what could the next, century look like, and think long term, getting people to think long term, which perhaps is the single most important thing we can do for ourselves and for our neighbors, is to start thinking more as stewards of the time we have, as opposed to, extracting from the resources and the time that we have.
Yes, as I said, I really do believe we are going to get to AGI within, a few years, definitely less than 10 in my mind. And the benefits that can give in scientific research, imagine having an AGI that trains itself, and I specifically say trains itself to be a PhD level researcher. And then you have 1 million copies of that. You have 1 million PhD level researchers chipping away at the problem. And you have this now developing nanotechnology, quantum computers, all the different diseases, energy, fusion energy, all of those things will be that technology will just move, will develop it so much faster with AGI. And, I cannot see anything more important than to make the right kind of AGI happen as soon as possible to help humanity. And it's just a pity that so few people are actually asking the question is, how do we get to AGI really? And what's the best way? And, we are just a small company, 15 people right now working on that. We're trying very, very hard to get people who can write a decent-sized check. Well, when I say decent-sized check, we're looking for 25 million, which is a total rounding error. This year, I believe there are $500 billion in investment in AI. We're looking for 25 million to hire another 50 people, and we believe we can complete our development and get to adult level intelligence in 2 years. That's how close we are. But
Remarkable.
It's just very hard to find people who even find, as always, if you have something that kind of leapfrogs and goes against the grain, it's very difficult for people to even pay attention, to that. It seems just too implausible.
So to that point, super appreciative of your time and background on this. For folks that want to learn more about artificial general intelligence, your work, anyone that might want to invest or that might be working at or running a company that is in some ways synergistic with what you're doing, what's the best way for folks to connect with you or your company and partners and move this forward with you?
Yeah, very easy. Just email me, Peter at AIGO.AI, AIGO.AI. Very easy to find me. I'm, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and with tons of articles, lay people kind of focused articles on our approach, cognitive AI and integrated neurosymbolic architecture that we use. But, I'm open, just contact me and we can take it from there.
Excellent. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Peter. Really glad to stay connected and share your story and background with the folks listening. Super excited to keep tabs on everything you have going on over there and watch you build AGI in the next few years.
Yes, well, thank you for the great questions. This was fun.
SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast is a production of M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com.